Nobody looks at the waitress. To the billionaires and power brokers dining at the Obsidian Room, she's just a pair of hands serving vintage Dom Perignon, a ghost in a uniform. But Elara Vance wasn't just pouring wine. She was analyzing. She spoke 19 languages fluently, 5 of them dead, yet she was struggling to pay rent on a basement apartment. The room went silent when tech mogul Julian Thorne slammed a crumbling, yellowed document onto table 12, threatening to fire his entire legal team because no one could decipher the dialect. Elara didn't just see ink on paper. She saw a sophisticated trap disguised as a contract. One whispered sentence from her lips was about to save him billions and put a massive target on her back. The air inside the Obsidian Room smelled of truffles, old money, and desperation. Located on the 50th floor of the Sterling Tower in Manhattan, it was the kind of place where a salad cost more than Elara Vance's weekly grocery budget. Elara adjusted the collar of her stiff black uniform. She was 24, with dark circles under her eyes that concealer couldn't quite hide. She moved through the dining room with the practiced efficiency of someone who knew that invisibility was her best defense. Table 12 needs a refill on the sparkly. The floor manager, a man named Henderson, who smelled perpetually of stale coffee, hissed at her. And don't look Mr. Thorne in the eye. He's in a mood. Understood, Elara murmured. Julian Thorne. Even without the tabloids, everyone knew who he was. CEO of Ether Dynamics, the youngest self-made billionaire in the history of the tech sector, and currently the man trying to secure exclusive mining rights for rare earth metals in a remote region of the Caucasus. He was handsome in a sharp, predatory way, steely grey eyes, a jawline that could cut glass, and a tailored suit that cost more than Elara's tuition had before she dropped out. Tonight, he wasn't eating. He was surrounded by 4 sweating lawyers and a man who looked like an antiquities dealer. The table was covered in papers, but the center of attention was a protective glass case containing a single, weathered sheet of parchment. Elara approached silently, the bottle of champagne wrapped in a white linen napkin. As she poured, she couldn't help but look down. The text on the parchment wasn't English. It wasn't French, Mandarin, or Russian. It was a script that looked like jagged claw marks running vertically down the page. "It's useless," Julian slammed his hand on the table, making the silverware rattle. Elara didn't flinch, pouring the liquid gold without spilling a drop. "I pay this firm $10 million a year, and you're telling me you can't verify the authenticity of the claim. The deadline is in 12 hours. "Mr. Thorne, please," the lead lawyer, a balding man named Mr. Greaves, stammered. "We've run it through every database. The linguists at Oxford say it's a dialect of Proto-Kartvelian, but it doesn't match the syntax. It's gibberish." "It's not gibberish," Julian snapped. "The tribal elders said this document proves the land rights belong to the localized lineage, not the state. If I sign the deal with the government tomorrow without verifying this, and the tribe produces a translation later, Ether Dynamics loses the mine and the $4 billion investment. I need to know what it says." Elara finished pouring. Her eyes locked onto the script. It wasn't Proto-Kartvelian. It was Old Ubik, but written in a shorthand cipher used by merchants in the Silk Road era to avoid taxes. It was a language spoken by perhaps 3 people in the modern world. Elara knew it because her father, the late Professor Vance, had spent his dying years obsessing over it. She saw the 3rd line. The syntax was tricky, a double negative used for emphasis. "The bearer of this stone holds the shadow, but the sun belongs to the wolf." It was a metaphor. In legal terms, it meant the document only granted rights to the subterranean minerals, but strictly prohibited surface access. If Julian signed a deal based on this text, thinking he had full access, he'd be sued for trespassing the moment his trucks rolled onto the land. He would own the minerals but have no legal way to dig them up. It was a trap, a $4 billion trap. "More wine, sir?" Elara asked softly. Julian ignored her. "Get me the University of Chicago on the line, now." Elara took a breath. She needed this job. Her mother's medical bills for her autoimmune treatment were piling up. Getting fired for speaking out of turn was a luxury she couldn't afford. But looking at the arrogant, desperate man, she felt a twinge of pity. Or maybe it was just the academic in her that couldn't stand to see a bad translation ruin everything. "It's not Proto-Cartvellian," she said. Her voice was quiet, but clear. The conversation at the table stopped dead. 5 pairs of eyes snapped to her. Julian Thorne looked up, his eyes narrowing. "Excuse me?" Henderson, the manager, materialized out of thin air, looking terrified. "I am so sorry, Mr. Thorne. She's new. Elara, get back to the kitchen immediately." "Wait," Julian said, raising a hand. He looked at Elara, really looked at her, for the first time. "What did you say?" Elara gripped the empty bottle. "I said, it's not Proto-Cartvellian. It's a merchant cipher of Old Ubik. And if you sign the deal based on that document, you're going to lose your investment." The silence that followed was deafening. Mr. Greaves, the lawyer, let out a scoff that sounded like a bark. "A waiter is giving us linguistic advice," Greaves sneered. "This is preposterous. Henderson, remove her." "Let her speak," Julian said, his voice cold and commanding. He turned his chair to face her fully. "Old Ubik is an extinct language. How would a waitress at a steakhouse know it?" "My father was Professor Silas Vance," Elara said, holding her ground. "He held the chair of comparative linguistics at Columbia before he passed. He taught me." Julian's eyes flickered. He recognized the name. Everyone in the field did. Silas Vance had been a legend before a gambling addiction and a scandal involving forged antiquities ruined his career. "Okay, Miss Vance," Julian said, gesturing to the glass case. "If you're so smart, tell me what it says. Translate the 3rd paragraph." Elara didn't need to look closer. She had a photographic memory, a gift that was both a blessing and a curse. It reads, "The rights to the earth beneath are granted to the holder, but the skin of the earth remains with the kin of the wolf." In modern legal terms, it's a split estate clause. You're buying the minerals, but the tribe retains 100% ownership of the surface land. You won't be able to build a mine, a road, or even pitch a tent without their separate permission, which they will likely deny or charge you triple for. Julian went pale. He snatched the paper from the lawyer and stared at it, as if he could force the meaning to change. That can't be right," Greaves stammered. "The government contract assures full access." "The government contract is void if a pre-existing tribal heritage claim is proven valid," Julian murmured, his mind racing. "And this document validates the tribal claim, but restricts the usage. They were setting me up to buy a worthless asset." He looked back at Elara. "Can you prove this?" Elara reached into her apron pocket and pulled out a cheap ballpoint pen. She grabbed a napkin. "The cipher relies on a shifting consonant structure. Look at the symbol that looks like a K. In standard Ubik, it's a velar stop, but in the merchant cipher, it shifts 2 places to the right because of the dot above the preceding vowel. It changes the word from owner to steward." She scribbled the linguistic breakdown on the napkin, drawing connection lines between the characters. It was complex, brilliant, and undeniable. Julian watched her work. He wasn't looking at the napkin anymore. He was looking at her hands. They were rough, chapped from washing dishes, but they moved with the precision of a surgeon. "Greaves," Julian barked. "Send a photo of this napkin to the head of linguistics at Cambridge. Tell him to verify the syntax shift." "Sir, it's 3 a.m. in England," Greaves protested. "Wake him up!" Julian roared. As the lawyer scrambled away with his phone, Henderson grabbed Ilara's arm. His fingers dug into her bicep. "You're fired," he whispered aggressively in her ear. "Get your things. You've embarrassed the VIPs." Ilara winced, pulling her arm away. She knew it was coming. "I'll go." She turned to leave, her heart sinking. She had just saved a billionaire from a disaster, and her reward was unemployment. She wondered if she had enough money for the subway ride home. "Where do you think you're going?" Julian's voice stopped her. She turned back. "I was just fired, sir. I'm leaving." Julian stood up. He was taller than she expected, towering over the table. "Henderson, is she fired?" "Yes, Mr. Thorne," Henderson said, puffing up his chest. "We have strict protocols about staff fraternizing with—" "Good," Julian interrupted, "because I'm hiring her." He looked at Ilara. "Pack your things. Not your locker. Your apartment. You're coming to the negotiation in Dubai." Ilara blinked. "Excuse me? You speak the language. You know the trap. My jet leaves in 2 hours. I'll pay you $50,000 for the weekend." Ilara's breath hitched. 50,000. That would pay off her mother's medical debt and cover her care for a year. It was a lifeline thrown from the heavens. I don't have a passport," she lied. She did, but it was expired. "I'm Julian Thorne," he said simply, buttoning his jacket. "I don't need passports. I need answers. Are you in, or are you going to go back to pouring wine for people who don't know you exist?" The interior of the Gulfstream G650 was larger than Ilara's entire apartment. The seats were upholstered in cream leather, and the air smelled of filtered oxygen and expensive cologne. Ilara sat awkwardly in a window seat, clutching her worn backpack. She was still wearing her waitress uniform, having only had time to grab a coat and her phone before Julian's security team whisked her into a black SUV. Julian was sitting across from her, typing furiously on a laptop. He hadn't said a word to her since they got in the car. "There's a wardrobe in the back," he said, without looking up. "Get changed. You look like you work for a caterer." "I do work for a caterer." "Or I did," Ilara shot back. She wasn't going to let him bully her just because he was writing the check. Julian stopped typing. He looked at her, a hint of amusement in his eyes. "Touché. There are clothes in the back. My assistant, Sarah, is about your size. Pick something professional. We land in Riyadh for a fuel stop, then Dubai. The meeting is at the Burj Al Arab." Ilara went to the back cabin. She found a rack of designer clothes, Chanel, Prada, Armani. She chose a simple navy blue business suit that looked modest but authoritative. When she looked in the mirror, she barely recognized herself. The uniform had made her feel small. This made her look like she belonged in the room. When she returned, Julian was on a call. He had put it on speaker. "The deal is falling apart, Julian," a frantic voice said. It was Marcus Sterling, Julian's biggest rival. "The consortium knows about the translation issues. They're saying you're incompetent. I'm preparing to offer them a buyout of your position." "Save your money, Marcus," Julian said smoothly. "I have a new lead translator. The issue is resolved." "Who?" Marcus laughed. "You fired your whole team. Who did you find at 9 p.m. on a Friday?" "God?" "Close," Julian said, glancing at Ilara. "I found a Vance." The line went silent. "A Vance? As in Silas Vance? He's dead. His daughter isn't." Julian cut the call. He looked at Ilara with intensity. "You didn't tell me your father had enemies." My father had a lot of enemies, Ilara said, sitting down. He was brilliant, but he was arrogant. He exposed a lot of forgeries in the private collections of very powerful people. Marcus Sterling was one of them. Sterling? Julian frowned. He collects artifacts. He deals in them, on the black market, Ilara revealed. My father found proof that Sterling was laundering money through fake Sumerian tablets. That's why my father lost his tenure. Sterling destroyed his reputation before he could go public. Julian sat back, steepling his fingers. So this isn't just a job for you, it's personal. I need the money, Mr. Thorne. My mother is sick, that's my priority. But if I can ruin Marcus Sterling's day while I'm at it, that's a bonus. Julian smiled. It was the first time she had seen him smile for real. It transformed his face, making him look younger, less like a statue, and more like a man. Call me Julian, he said, and get some sleep. You're going to need it. The men we are meeting in Dubai aren't businessmen. They're warlords in Armani suits, and they don't like being outsmarted. Ilara leaned her head back against the leather seat. The hum of the engines lulled her, but her mind was racing. She had stepped out of the shadows and into the spotlight, and she knew one thing for certain. In Julian Thorne's world, the spotlight was the most dangerous place to be. The conference room on the top floor of the Burj Al Arab was an assault on the senses. It was less a room, and more a gilded cage suspended in the sky, overlooking the turquoise expanse of the Persian Gulf. Everything dripped with gold leaf, marble, and an aggressive, opulent silence that was meant to intimidate. Julian walked in first, his stride confident, a predator entering a rival's territory. Ilara followed a step behind, clutching a sleek leather portfolio Julian had provided. She felt ridiculous in the expensive suit, an imposter waiting to be unmasked. But when she looked at Julian's broad back, she remembered the $50,000. She remembered her mother's tired face in the hospital bed. She straightened her spine. She wasn't a waitress today. She was the daughter of Silas Vance, and she was about to go to war with words. 3 men sat at the massive malachite table. They didn't stand when Julian entered. The central figure was Arif al-Jamil, a man whose family controlled vast tracts of land in the Caucasus region. He was impossibly smooth, his smile not reaching his eyes, which were cold and calculating as an abacus. "Mr. Thorne," Arif said, his voice like velvet over gravel. "You are late. We expected you yesterday to sign the preliminaries." "I had to verify some assets," Julian said coolly, taking the seat opposite Arif. He gestured to Ilara. "This is my associate, Ms. Vance. She will be handling the final linguistic review of the heritage documents." Arif's eyes flicked to Ilara, dismissing her instantly. A woman. Young. Unimportant. A linguist? We provided certified translations, Julian. Surely you trust our good faith. Trust is expensive, Arif. Verification is cheap, Julian replied. "Let's see the document." A heavy leather-bound portfolio was slid across the table. Julian opened it to reveal the original parchment, the same one from the restaurant, now encased in museum-quality acrylic. "As we discussed," Arif began, leaning forward, "this document grants Ether Dynamics exclusive rights to the mineral deposits in Sector 4, a straightforward transaction for $4 billion, payable upon signing." Julian didn't look at the document. He looked at Ilara. "Ms. Vance?" Ilara stepped forward. Her heart hammered against her ribs, but her hands were steady as she placed her own portfolio on the table. She didn't look at the parchment. She looked directly at Arif. "It is straightforward, Mr. Al-Jamil," Ilara said, her voice clear and ringing in the large room. "It is a straightforward fraud." The silence in the room shattered. The 2 men flanking Arif stood up halfway, their hands moving toward the insides of their jackets. Julian's own security detail, stationed by the door, tensed. Arif held up a hand to stop his men, but his smile vanished. "Explain yourself, girl, before I have you removed for slander." Ilara opened her portfolio. Inside wasn't a translation of the text, but a historical analysis of Ubik merchant law. "I don't need to translate the document again, Arif. We both know what it says. The wolf clause, the split estate trap. You intended to sell Mr. Thorne useless dirt while you kept control of the surface." Arif laughed, a harsh, barking sound. "This is absurd. Interpretations vary. Not this interpretation," Ilara cut him off. She felt a strange surge of power. This was her domain. These were her rules. "You used the shadow script cipher. It was clever. But you forgot something about the people who invented it. The Ubik mountain tribes were traders, but they were obsessed with honor. They had a legal concept called kataga, the truth price." She slid a piece of paper across the malachite table. It contained a blown-up image of the very seal at the bottom of the parchment, a complex knot design. "You thought this was just a decorative seal," Ilara said, pointing to a minuscule, almost invisible break in the ink line of the knot. "It's not. In the shadow script, a broken seal signifies a conditional contract subject to kataga. It means if one party attempts deliberate deception within the primary text, the deceived party doesn't just void the contract, they are entitled to the entire asset as penalty." Ilara leaned in, her eyes blazing. "By presenting this document with the intent to trap him with the surface rights clause, you have legally invoked the truth price. According to the very tribal law you are using to claim ownership, Julian doesn't owe you $4 billion. You owe him the land. For free." The color drained from Arif's face. It was a bluff, an obscure piece of linguistic history that probably wouldn't hold up in a modern international court. But Arif didn't know that. He was a businessman, not a scholar. He saw the absolute conviction in Ilara's eyes, the legacy of Silas Vance staring him down. "You're lying," Arif whispered, but his voice lacked conviction. "Try me," Julian interjected softly. "We can take this to the International Court in The Hague. I'll fly in every living expert on Caucasian linguistics. It will tie up your land assets for a decade. You'll be bankrupt before the first hearing." Arif stared at Julian, then at Ilara. The smooth facade crumbled. He wasn't looking at a gullible billionaire and his secretary anymore. He was looking at a shark and the person who just cemented the shark's teeth. "Who are you?" Arif hissed at Ilara. "Nobody," Ilara said. "Just the waitress who reads the fine print." Arif slammed his fist on the table. "The deal is off. Get out." "The deal isn't off, Arif." Julian stood up, buttoning his jacket. "The price just changed. We'll draft a new agreement. Full surface and subsurface rights. $2 billion. Take it or leave it. You have 1 hour." Julian turned and walked out. Ilara grabbed her portfolio, feeling lightheaded, and followed him. As the heavy doors closed behind them, she heard the sound of expensive porcelain smashing against a wall inside the room. The adrenaline crash hit Ilara the moment they stepped back into the hushed, climate-controlled environment of Julian's private suite at the hotel. Her knees buckled slightly. Julian caught her elbow, his grip firm but gentle. "Steady. You did good in there. Better than good. That bit about the kataga, the truth price, was that real?" Ilara managed a weak smile as she sank onto a plush sofa. "It existed, but it hasn't been enforced since the 17th century. It was a massive bluff. If he had called my bluff, we would have been laughed out of court." Julian stared at her, a slow grin spreading across his face. He walked to a wet bar and poured 2 glasses of amber liquid. He handed her one. "Whiskey. Drink it. You're terrifying, Elara Vance. You just bluffed a warlord out of $2 billion with a 400-year-old legal footnote. She took a sip. The whiskey burned pleasantly, grounding her. I grew up watching my father bluff antique dealers who were trying to pass off Roman copies as Greek originals. It's all about confidence. Julian sat in the armchair opposite her, loosening his tie. The tension of the negotiation had left him, replaced by a humming energy. He looked at her differently now. The transaction, money for translation, had shifted into something else. Respect. Your father, Julian said, swirling his glass. Tell me about him. The real story. Not what the papers said. Elara looked into her glass. He loved dead languages more than living people, sometimes. He was obsessed with the truth hidden in words. He used to say that history is just a game of telephone, and his job was to find the person who started the whisper. Her voice tightened. Sterling knew that obsession was his weakness. Sterling fed him a discovery, some clay tablets that would have rewritten Bronze Age history. My father wanted it to be true, so badly he ignored the red flags. When Sterling revealed they were fakes he'd planted, my father's reputation didn't just crack, it shattered. The academic world exiled him. He drank himself to death within 5 years. The silence in the room was heavy. Julian set his glass down. His grey eyes were intense. Sterling didn't just want to ruin him, Julian said quietly. Your father must have found something on him beforehand. Something damaging. He did, Elara nodded. Proof that Sterling was funding his legitimate business operations with capital from illegal antiquities trade in conflict zones. Blood money. My father was going to the FBI the week the scandal broke. Sterling preempted him. Julian stood up and walked to the window, looking out over the sprawling, futuristic skyline of Dubai. Marcus Sterling is the reason I was fighting so hard for that mine. He owns the primary competitors in the rare earth sector. He's been trying to choke ether dynamics out of the supply chain for years. If I get that mine, I break his monopoly. He turned back to Elara. We're fighting the same war, Elara, just on different fronts. He crossed the room and stood in front of her. Don't go back to the restaurant. Stay on. As my lead analyst, name your salary. I need someone who can see the traps before I step in them. I need you. The offer hung in the air. It was everything she could have dreamed of a week ago. Financial security. A chance to use her mind. A chance to fight back against the man who destroyed her family. Before she could answer, her phone buzzed violently on the coffee table. It was an international call, New York area code. Her stomach dropped. It's the hospital, she whispered, snatching the phone. Hello? This is Elara. Julian watched as all the color drained from her face. Her hand started shaking uncontrollably. What do you mean, visitors? She's in isolation. Who let them in? Elara's voice rose to a panicked pitch. Did they hurt her? What message? Okay. Lock the door. Call security. I'm on my way back. Don't let anyone near her. She ended the call, her breath coming in short, sharp gasps. She looked up at Julian, her eyes wide with terror. What happened? Julian demanded, already reaching for his own phone. 2 men, Elara said, her voice trembling. They got into my mother's room at the hospital. They didn't touch her. They just stood over her bed while she was sleeping and left a note on her bedside table. What did the note say? Elara swallowed hard, tears welling in her eyes. It just said, translation errors have consequences. Stick to serving tables, Miss Vance. Julian's face turned to stone. The air in the room seemed to drop 20 degrees. It was Sterling. He couldn't get to Julian in Dubai, and Arif had failed to crush him in the negotiation, so Sterling had gone for the weakest link. He had crossed a line that men like Julian Thorne did not tolerate being crossed. "Arif must have called Sterling the second we left the room," Julian said, his voice terrifyingly calm. He hit a speed dial on his phone. "Get the jet prepped. We leave in 20 minutes. And call my head of security in New York. I want a 24-hour armed guard placed outside Mrs. Vance's hospital room immediately. No one gets in unless Ilara clears them personally. If Sterling's goons so much as look at the hospital building again, I want them put down." He hung up and looked at Ilara. The billionaire businessman was gone. In his place was something much more dangerous, a powerful man who had just decided to make something personal. "He made a mistake," Julian told her, his eyes burning fiercely. "He thinks this will scare you off. He doesn't realize he just ensured you're never leaving my side until he's buried." He held out a hand to her. "Let's go home, Ilara. We have a war to finish." The Metropolitan Museum of Art was closed to the public, but the Great Hall was alive with the hum of $1 billion moving in whispers. It was the annual Sterling Foundation Gala, the night Marcus Sterling cemented his status as a philanthropist and untouchable titan of industry. The centerpiece of the evening was the auction of the Sumerian King's Lament, a clay tablet recently discovered by Sterling's archaeological team, a find projected to sell for over $200 million. Julian Thorne and Ilara Vance arrived not in a limousine, but in a phantom black armored sedan that cut through the paparazzi flashes like a shark through water. Inside the car, Ilara smoothed the fabric of her dress. It was no longer the borrowed business suit from the jet. It was a weapon made of emerald silk, custom-fitted in hours by a team Julian had summoned to the penthouse. It hugged her frame and flowed like liquid money, the deep green contrasting sharply with her pale skin and dark hair. Around her neck sat a diamond choker that cost more than the restaurant she used to work in. "You're shaking," Julian noted, his voice low. He looked devastating in a tuxedo, but his eyes were hard, scanning the crowd outside the tinted windows. "I'm not shaking because I'm scared," Ilara replied, her voice steady despite the adrenaline coursing through her. "I'm shaking because I'm angry. That tablet inside? It's the same forgery style he used to frame my father. He's selling a lie to the world, and he destroyed my family to keep the secret." "Then let's go break his secret," Julian said. He reached over and took her hand. His grip was warm, grounding. "Security is tight, but I bought a table under a shell corporation 5 months ago. He won't know we're here until it's too late. The FBI team is on standby outside. They just need the signal." "The signal?" "You," Julian said. "You proving it's a fake. Once the fraud is exposed, his immunity cracks. That's when we strike." The car doors opened. The flashbulbs were blinding. Julian guided her up the massive stone steps, his hand on the small of her back. They moved through the security checkpoint effortlessly. The great hall was transformed into a Babylonian fantasy. Hanging gardens draped from the balconies, and the air was thick with the scent of jasmine and expensive champagne. At the center of the room, on a rotating pedestal inside a bulletproof glass cube, sat the tablet. It was jagged, covered in cuneiform script, ancient and imposing. A hush fell over the room as the guests noticed Julian. Conversations died, heads turned. Marcus Sterling, who was holding court near the podium with a glass of scotch, froze. He was a tall man with silver hair and a face that looked like it had been carved from granite, handsome but cruel. Sterling recovered quickly. He excused himself from a senator and walked toward them, a shark glinting in his eyes. "Julian," Sterling drawled, his voice loud enough to carry. "I didn't realize you were a patron of the arts. I assumed you were too busy crying over your lost mining deal in Dubai." "The deal went through, Marcus," Julian said smoothly, picking a glass of champagne from a passing tray and handing it to Ilara. "We actually got a better price. Turns out, reading the fine print pays off." Sterling's jaw tightened. He looked at Ilara, his eyes raking over her with disdain. "And this must be the little waitress? You clean up well, dear? Though I suppose anything looks good when it's draped in my competitor's money. How is your mother? Sleeping well?" The threat was subtle, vile, and perfectly audible. Ilara felt a flash of cold rage. She took a step forward, closing the distance. "She sleeps fine, Mr. Sterling," Ilara said, her voice projecting with a confidence that surprised even her, especially now that she knows the truth is coming. "The truth?" Sterling laughed, gesturing to the room. "The truth is what I say it is. I am auctioning history tonight. You are serving drinks in a costume." "I'm not here to serve," Ilara said, her eyes locking onto the tablet in the center of the room. "I'm here to bid." A murmur went through the crowd. Julian smirked. "That's right. We're interested in the tablet. But we'd like to inspect the merchandise first. Standard due diligence for a 9-figure investment." Sterling narrowed his eyes. He couldn't refuse without looking suspicious in front of the gathered elite. "The tablet has been authenticated by the Louvre and the British Museum." "From photographs," Ilara corrected him. "Not in person. If it's real, you have nothing to hide from a dropped-out linguistics student, do you?" The trap was sprung. If he said no, he looked weak. If he said yes, he risked exposure. But Sterling was arrogant. He believed his forgery was perfect. He believed Silas Vance was the only one who could have ever spotted the flaw, and Silas was dead. "Be my guest," Sterling sneered, waving his hand toward the case. "Entertain us." The Metropolitan Museum of Art did not look like a museum tonight. It looked like a fortress of diamonds and ego. The annual Sterling Foundation Gala was the most exclusive event on the New York social calendar, a night where billionaires came to pretend they were philanthropists while trading favors that would shift the global economy. Outside, the flashbulbs of the paparazzi created a strobing wall of white light, blinding and chaotic. But inside the tinted rear cabin of the armored phantom black Maybach, the world was silent. Ilara Vance sat perfectly still. She wasn't wearing the stiff, stained uniform of the steakhouse anymore. She was draped in a gown of emerald silk that seemed to pour over her body like liquid gem fire. It was backless, daring, and cost more than her mother's entire life earnings. Her dark hair was swept up in an intricate chignon, held in place by vintage diamond pins that caught the passing streetlights. She looked like royalty. She felt like she was about to be sick. "Breathe," Julian's voice came from the shadows beside her. He leaned forward, adjusting his cufflinks. He looked devastating in a midnight blue tuxedo, the sharp lines of his face accentuated by the dim light. But his eyes were cold, focused, calculating, the eyes of a wolf waiting for the deer to step into the clearing. "I can't believe we're doing this," Ilara whispered, her hands gripping the leather seat. "Marcus Sterling is the most powerful man in the antiquities world. If we miss, if I'm wrong—" "You aren't wrong," Julian said firmly. He reached out, covering her trembling hand with his own. His skin was warm, his grip grounding. "You are the daughter of Silas Vance. You have more knowledge in your little finger than Sterling has in his entire corrupt foundation. Tonight isn't about business, Ilara. It's about balance. He took your father's life. He tried to threaten your mother. Tonight, we take his legacy." He squeezed her hand. "Are you ready to play the part?" Ilara closed her eyes for a second. She thought of her father, drinking cheap whiskey in the dark, weeping over a reputation he couldn't salvage. She thought of the men standing over her mother's hospital bed. The fear evaporated, replaced by a cold, sharp anger that settled in her chest like a stone. She opened her eyes. They were clear. "I'm ready." The car door opened. The noise of the crowd hit them like a physical wave. As Ilara stepped out, Julian's hand found the small of her back. The touch was possessive, protective, and it sent a jolt of electricity up her spine. They moved up the massive stone steps of the Met, a unified front against the world. The great hall had been transformed into a Babylon-inspired fantasy. Massive hanging gardens draped from the balconies, and the air was thick with the scent of jasmine, expensive cologne, and money. Waiters moved through the crowd with trays of vintage champagne, invisible ghosts just like Ilara used to be. She looked at one of them, a young girl with tired eyes, and felt a surge of solidarity. "I am doing this for us too," she thought. In the center of the room, bathed in a solitary beam of spotlight, sat the prize, the Sumerian king's lament. It rested on a velvet pillow inside a bulletproof glass cube. It was a clay tablet, roughly the size of a modern tablet computer, covered in the jagged bird-track script of ancient cuneiform. The bidding was set to start at $50 million, but rumors whispered it would go for over 200. "There he is," Julian murmured, his voice barely audible over the hum of the crowd. Marcus Sterling stood near the podium, holding court. He was a tall man, silver-haired and impeccably dressed, with a smile that looked charming until you noticed it never reached his eyes. He was laughing at a joke made by a senator, his hand resting casually on the shoulder of the museum's curator. Julian didn't wait. He steered Ilara directly through the crowd, cutting a path through the elite like an icebreaker ship. Sterling saw them coming. His smile faltered for a fraction of a second, replaced by a flash of annoyance, before the charming mask slipped back into place. "Julian!" Sterling called out, or his voice booming enough to draw the attention of the nearby circle. "I must say, I'm surprised. I heard you were licking your wounds in Dubai after that mining deal collapsed. Did you come to drown your sorrows in my open bar?" "The deal in Dubai went through, Marcus," Julian said smoothly, stopping 3 feet from the older man. "We renegotiated. Better terms. Turns out reading the fine print is a lost art." Sterling's jaw tightened, but he turned his gaze to Ilara. His eyes raked over her, stripping away the expensive dress, looking for the weakness. "And you brought a date?" Sterling sneered softly, his voice dripping with condescension. "I recognize you. You're the waitress, the one who spilled water near my table last month. Julian, really? I know you like to play savior, but dressing up the help and parading them at a gala? It's a bit gauche." The senator and the curator chuckled nervously. Ilara felt the heat rise in her cheeks, but she didn't look down. She remembered what Julian had told her. Predators attack when you look away. "I'm not here to serve drinks, Mr. Sterling," Ilara said. Her voice was steady, projecting with a clarity that cut through the chatter. "I'm here for the tablet." Sterling laughed, a harsh, barking sound. "You? My dear, the paddle to bid costs more than your education. Stick to the buffet." "Actually," Julian interrupted, his voice dropping an octave, becoming dangerous. "We are strictly interested in the authenticity of the piece. We're preparing a bid, but my associate here has some concerns regarding the provenance." "Provenance?" Sterling scoffed. "It has been authenticated by the Louvre. It has been carbon dated. It is the find of the century." "Then you won't mind if I take a closer look?" Ilara challenged. "If it's real, you have nothing to hide from a waitress, do you?" The trap was sprung. The room had gone quiet. People were watching. Competitors, investors, the press. If Sterling refused, he looked weak, as if he were afraid of a young woman. His arrogance, the very thing that had allowed him to destroy Silas Vance, would be his undoing. Sterling's eyes narrowed. He gestured to the glass case with a mock bow. "By all means, entertain us. Let's see what the kitchen staff thinks of high archaeology." Ilara stepped forward. The crowd parted, creating a circle around the display. She could feel the weight of hundreds of eyes on her back. She walked to the glass cube. A technician, sensing the tension, pressed a button, and the protective glass hissed as it lowered, exposing the raw clay to the air. Ilara leaned in. She didn't touch it. She didn't need to. Her mind, the library of dead languages that her father had built brick by brick, snapped into focus. She scanned the clay. The texture was right. Fine-grain river silt from the Tigris banks. The firing marks were consistent with the III period ovens. It was a masterpiece of forgery. Sterling had spent millions creating this lie. But language is a living ghost. It leaves fingerprints that cannot be faked. Ilara straightened up. She turned to the crowd, then looked at Sterling. "It's breathtaking," she said. Sterling smirked, crossing his arms. "I told you." "The calligraphy is exquisite," Ilara continued, her voice gaining strength. "The scribe has used the classical Sumerian dialect perfectly. The prayer is a standard lamentation for King Shulgi, asking the gods for mercy in the afterlife." "We know what it says," Sterling snapped, checking his watch. "Are you done wasting our time?" "I'm just admiring the craftsmanship," Ilara said, her eyes hardening, "because it takes a lot of effort to make a mistake this specific." Sterling froze. "Excuse me?" Ilara pointed a manicured finger at the third column of the text. "Right there. Line 14. The scribe uses the cuneiform symbol for star, used here to represent the god Anu. Yes, the sky god," Sterling said dismissively. "Basic theology. Move along." "The symbol is correct," Ilara said, her voice ringing out now, silencing the entire Great Hall. "But the orientation is wrong." She looked at the crowd, addressing the room like a lecture hall. In the III period, around 2100 BC, the symbol for star was written with the top wedge pointing directly up, at 90 degrees. However, on this tablet, the top wedge is tilted at a 45-degree angle. She turned back to Sterling. That stylistic shift, the tilted wedge, was introduced by the scribes of Babylon during the reign of Hammurabi. That happened 400 years after this tablet was supposedly baked. A murmur rippled through the room. The curator leaned in, squinting at the tablet, his face paling. "This is absurd," Sterling hissed, sweat beading on his forehead. "It's a stylistic variance, a regional dialect." "It's not a variance," Ilara countered relentlessly. "It's an anachronism. It is linguistically impossible. It's the equivalent of finding a letter written by Julius Caesar that uses the word smartphone. The person who wrote this wasn't a Sumerian priest. He was a modern forger copying from a textbook, and he mixed up his eras." "She's lying!" Sterling roared, his composure shattering. He lunged forward, his face turning a violent shade of purple. "She's a fraud. She's the daughter of Silas Vance, a drunk and a liar. Madness runs in her blood." "My father wasn't mad," Ilara shouted back, her voice shaking with raw emotion. "He found this exact same mistake on the Gilgamesh shards you sold in 2018. That's why you destroyed him. You planted fake evidence in his office to discredit him because he knew. He knew you were running a forgery ring out of the basement of this very foundation." "Security!" Sterling screamed, pointing a trembling finger at Ilara. "Get this hysterical woman out of here. Throw her in the street." 3 large men in black suits pushed off the wall, moving toward Ilara with intent. Ilara didn't flinch. She didn't move, because Julian Thorne stepped in front of her. He didn't raise his voice. He didn't raise a fist. He simply stood there, an immovable object radiating so much power that the security guard skidded to a halt. "I wouldn't do that," Julian said softly. "You don't give orders here, Thorne," Sterling spat. "I own this city." "Not anymore," Julian said. He reached into his tuxedo pocket and pulled out his phone. He held it up, the screen glowing. "Do it." At that exact moment, the massive oak doors at the entrance of the Great Hall were kicked open with a thunderous crash. "FBI! Nobody move!" The scream tore through the gala. Dozens of agents in tactical gear, emblazoned with yellow FBI letters, flooded the room, weapons drawn. The socialites screamed and scattered, dropping champagne glasses that shattered on the marble floor. Sterling spun around, looking for an exit, but two agents were already flanking the podium. Agent Miller, a stern-faced woman who had been coordinating with Julian for weeks, marched up the steps. She held up a warrant. "Marcus Sterling," she announced, her voice amplified by the room's acoustics. "You are under arrest for wire fraud, racketeering, the traffic of counterfeit antiquities, and conspiracy to commit assault." "You have nothing!" Sterling shrieked as an agent grabbed his arm, twisting it behind his back. "This is a set-up! That girl is lying!" Julian stepped up to the podium, Ilara right beside him. He looked down at the man who had terrorized them. "We don't need the tablet, Marcus," Julian said coldly. "While Ilara was keeping you busy with the history lesson, my cybersecurity team decrypted your private server. We found the emails, the order to forge the tablet, the payments to the forgers in Verify, and the order to intimidate Ilara's mother at the hospital." Sterling's face went white. He looked at Ilara, really looked at her, and saw the depth of his mistake. He hadn't just underestimated a waitress. He had underestimated the power of the truth. "My father was a good man," Ilara said, her voice quiet but heavy with finality. "He loved the truth more than anything. You killed him for it. But you couldn't kill the truth." "Get him out of here," Agent Miller ordered. As they dragged Sterling away, kicking and cursing, flashing cameras captured the image that would be on the front page of every newspaper in the world tomorrow: the billionaire falling, and the woman in the emerald dress standing tall over his ruin. The room slowly began to clear as agents secured the scene. The adrenaline that had sustained Ilara suddenly drained away, leaving her knees weak. She swayed, but Julian was there instantly, his arm wrapping around her waist, holding her up. "You did it," he whispered into her hair. "Ilara, look at me. You did it." She looked up at him. Her eyes were bright with unshed tears. "It's over. He can't hurt us. He's never hurting anyone again. He's going to prison for the rest of his life." Ilara let out a breath she felt like she had been holding for 5 years. She looked around the empty hall, then back at Julian. The dynamic had shifted. The danger was gone, and in the sudden silence, the air between them crackled with a different kind of tension. "So," Ilara said, a shy smile touching her lips. "The contract is fulfilled. Sterling is down. I guess I'm unemployed again." Julian shook his head slowly. His eyes searched hers, intense and vulnerable. "The contract is over, yes. But I find myself with a new problem." "Oh?" Ilara asked, her heart hammering against her ribs. "And what is that?" "I've realized I can't function without my partner," Julian said softly. He reached up, his thumb tracing the line of her jaw. "I need someone who can read the things I miss. Someone who isn't afraid to tell me I'm wrong. Someone who looks at a room full of billionaires and sees only the truth." He stepped closer, eliminating the space between them. "I don't want an employee, Ilara. I want you, by my side, always." "Are you negotiating with me, Julian?" she whispered. "I'm surrendering," he replied. He leaned down and kissed her. It wasn't tentative. It was a collision, a claiming. It tasted of champagne, victory, and promise. Elara wrapped her arms around his neck, pulling him closer, burying her hands in his hair. In the middle of the crime scene, surrounded by the ruins of a false empire, they built something real. The morning sun streamed through the floor-to-ceiling windows of the corner office overlooking Central Park. The bronze plaque on the door read, "The Vance Institute for Linguistic Preservation." Elara sat at her mahogany desk, carefully examining a 12th century scroll that had just arrived from a monastery in Tibet. The institute, fully funded by an anonymous donation from Ether Dynamics, was dedicated to preserving endangered languages and exposing forgeries in the market. Her phone buzzed on the desk. She smiled before she even looked at the screen. Incoming message. "Julian, I'm landing from Tokyo in an hour. The merger is done. I have a new document for you to look at. It's in Aramaic. Also, I made reservations at that Italian place you love, the one with the cheap wine." Elara laughed, typing back quickly. "I'll decipher the Aramaic, but my consulting fee has gone up, and the cheap wine is on you." She hit send and leaned back in her chair. She looked at the framed photo on her desk. It was an old, grainy picture of her father, Silas Vance, laughing in a dusty library. Next to it was a new photo, a selfie taken on a beach in Bali, with Julian kissing her cheek while she beamed at the camera. The invisible waitress who cleaned up other people's messes was gone. In her place was Elara Vance, guardian of the truth, scourge of liars, and the brilliant partner of the only man who was smart enough to listen to her. She picked up her pen and went back to work. There were thousands of languages in the world, and she intended to save them all. What an incredible finale. Elara didn't just translate a document. She translated her pain into power and took down a titan. It is so satisfying to see Sterling's arrogance be his downfall, proving that the truth really is the most powerful weapon of all. Julian and Elara are the ultimate power couple. Brains, beauty, and billions. If this story kept you on the edge of your seat, please smash that like button. It helps the channel grow and lets me know you want more stories like this. Don't forget to subscribe and hit the bell icon so you never miss a new upload. Who was your favorite character? Did you guess the twist about the tablet? Let me know in the comments below. Share this video with someone who needs a reminder that the underdog can win. Thanks for watching, and I'll see you in the next story.